She walked into the elite shooting range, looking hopelessly out of place, a widow in a faded cardigan against millionaires in designer gear. When the reigning champion mocked her, nobody guessed she'd been trained by a Navy SEAL sniper. With one bullet, she didn't just shatter his record. She exposed the arrogance of a world that judges skill by status. Here's how a single shot rewrote the rules of power. The sound of a perfect shot echoed through the elite shooters club, followed by thunderous applause from wealthy patrons dressed in designer shooting gear. Blake Radcliffe lowered his custom Remington, a smirk spreading across his tan face as the target showed another bullseye. This was his kingdom, a world where money, power, and skill created an impenetrable barrier between the elite and everyone else. If you've ever been underestimated or made to feel invisible, you might want to stay for what happened next, the moment that changed everything. At America's most prestigious shooting range, Emma Miller stood near the entrance, clutching her worn leather purse, her simple blue cardigan and department store jeans, making her stick out like a dandelion in a rose garden. At 35, she was neither young enough to turn heads nor successful enough to command respect in this circle. The receptionist, a young woman with immaculate blonde hair and a practiced smile, looked up then immediately backed down as though Emma were merely a distraction. "Excuse me," Emma said softly. "I'd like to register for today's open practice session." The receptionist glanced up again, this time allowing her gaze to travel from Emma's sensible shoes to her simple ponytail. "Membership cards only," she replied dismissively. Emma took a deep breath, pulling out a crinkled envelope. "I have a day pass." It was a gift. Blake noticed the newcomer from across the room. At 42, he was at the peak of his career, five-time national champion, Olympic gold medalist, and the face of Remington's premium line. His family's oil fortune had given him access to the best training since childhood, and his natural talent had done the rest. Well, Blake drawled loudly. "Looks like someone took a wrong turn on the way to Walmart." His companions laughed on cue, drawing more attention to Emma, who was making her way to the basic range, eyes fixed on the floor. Rebecca Johnson, the club's manager and a former competitive shooter herself, frowned at Blake's comment, but said nothing. Emma found a spot at the far end of the basic range. She carefully placed her purse on the small shelf and withdrew a cloth-wrapped package. With practiced movements, she unfolded the material to reveal a standard Glock 19, serviceable, but nothing like the custom pieces club members wielded. Blake and his friends had migrated closer, their interest piqued by the opportunity for entertainment. $10 says she can't hit the target, one joked. Blake scoffed. "Make it $10,000. I bet she's never held a gun in her life." Blake sauntered over to Emma's station. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his false politeness dripping with condescension. "Are you sure you're in the right place? This isn't a knitting circle." Emma finally looked up, her hazel eyes meeting Blake's blue ones with a steadiness that momentarily threw him off balance. "I'm just here to practice," she said quietly. Blake recovered quickly. "Practice, honey? This is a place for serious shooters. $10,000 says you can't hit the bullseye from 50 yards. Emma's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. "I don't have that kind of money," she replied. Blake's smile widened. "If by some miracle you make the shot, I pay. If you miss, you leave and never come back. Deal?" Rebecca had approached during the exchange, concern evident. "Mr. Radcliffe, perhaps we should let our guest practice in peace." Blake waved her off without looking. "Stay out of this, Rebecca. We're just having a friendly wager." Emma's gaze dropped to her left hand, where a simple gold band encircled her ring finger. She twisted it once, a gesture so small that only the most observant would have noticed. The crowd's applause faded as Emma's finger brushed her wedding ring. 3 years ago, this shot would have made Nathan grin. Now, it was just a ghost's echo and a vow she'd finally keep. "All right," she said quietly. Blake's eyebrows shot up in surprise before his face settled into a triumphant smirk. Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, we have ourselves a show. No one noticed the change in Emma's posture as she picked up her Glock, spine straightening, shoulders relaxing, feet shifting into a perfectly balanced stance. No one recognized the expert grip and controlled breathing pattern. And no one realized that the simple gold ring on her finger once belonged to one of the most legendary snipers in SEAL Team 6 history. 3 years earlier, Emma had stood under a gray April sky, the crisp snap of the Honor Guard's rifles cutting through the solemn silence of Arlington National Cemetery. The folded American flag pressed against her chest felt impossibly heavy as she watched her husband's casket being lowered into the ground. Master Chief Nathan Miller had served his country for 15 years, his exceptional skills as a sniper earning him both medals and the respectful nickname, the Ghost, among his peers. The official report cited a helicopter crash during a classified mission. Emma knew better. There were aspects of Nathan's death that would remain redacted forever. They had met in Burlington, Vermont, where Nathan was visiting a fellow SEAL recovering from injuries. Emma was working as an accountant, her life as predictable as the numbers she managed daily. Their meeting at a downtown coffee shop stretched from apologies over spilled coffee into hours of conversation. They married just 6 months later in a small ceremony attended by a few friends and Nathan's fellow operators with vigilant eyes. Life as a SEAL's wife had taught Emma to live with absence and uncertainty. Nathan would disappear for weeks or months, returning with new scars he wouldn't explain and nightmares he couldn't share. I wish I could tell you everything, he would say, tracing her cheekbone with his callous thumb. But I can tell you this. You're the reason I fight to come home. It was during one extended period stateside, after a harrowing mission that had left Nathan with a ligament tear in his knee, that he first took Emma to a shooting range. If I'm going to be away so much, he had explained, adjusting her stance with gentle hands, I want to know you can protect yourself. What began as a safety measure evolved into something more, a shared activity that gave Emma insight into her husband's world. Nathan turned out to be a patient instructor, and Emma, an unexpectedly gifted student. You're a natural, he'd whispered the first time she hit a bullseye. You've got the three things that make a great shooter: steady hands, perfect vision, and the ability to stay calm under pressure. Over the next 3 years, whenever Nathan was home, they would practice together. He taught her everything: proper stance, breathing control, sight alignment, trigger discipline. Shooting isn't about aggression, he would explain. It's about absolute control over your body, your breath, your fear. Emma absorbed every lesson, finding unexpected peace in the ritual. Those sessions at the range were sacred, moments of connection that didn't require words. Sometimes his SEAL teammates would join them. Boss never shuts up about your progress. One of them, Michael Reeves, had confided. Says you're a better natural shot than half the guys he's trained. The last time they went shooting together was 2 days before he left for his final mission. Nathan had been unusually quiet, more focused on watching Emma than improving his own shots. Promise me something, he said, his voice rough against her ear. Promise me you'll keep practicing, even when I'm not here. Emma had nodded, not understanding the gravity behind his request. After the funeral, Emma couldn't bring herself to visit a range. Nathan's guns remained locked in their safe, untouched. She moved to Boston for a fresh start, taking a position at a corporate accounting firm where no one knew her as the widow of a fallen SEAL until last week, when a package arrived from Michael Reeves containing a day pass to the Elite Shooters Club and a handwritten note. Nathan would want you to keep your promise. 3 years is long enough to grieve alone. Come back to the living, Emma. Now standing in the Elite Shooters Club with Blake Radcliffe's challenge hanging in the air, Emma felt something stir within her, a spark of the person she had been before grief hollowed her out. As she lifted the Glock, muscle memory took over. The world narrowed to 3 points: herself, the gun, and the target. Emma took a deep breath, held it for a moment, then slowly exhaled halfway and squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, crisp and clean in the hushed range. Through the settling echo, the mechanical whir of the target retrieval system seemed unnaturally loud. Blake maintained his amused expression, though uncertainty crossed his features as he noted Emma's textbook stance. The target moved slowly toward them, building suspense with each mechanical click. When the paper target finally arrived, a perfect hole marked the dead center of the bullseye. The silence that followed was profound, a vacuum of sound where Blake and his entourage struggled to process what they were seeing. Emma calmly placed the Glock on the counter, her expression unchanged. Blake snatched the target, examining it closely. Beginner's luck, he finally declared, his voice carrying a sharp edge. Anyone can get lucky once. Rebecca stepped forward, her professional mask slipping to reveal genuine admiration. That was an exceptional shot, miss. Miller, Emma supplied quietly. Emma Miller. Rebecca nodded, offering a smile that was both apologetic and impressed. Miss Miller, perhaps you'd like to try our advanced range facilities. Clearly, you're not a beginner. Before Emma could respond, Blake interjected. Hold on. One lucky shot doesn't make her a pro. Let's see if she can do it again, this time with real stakes. An uncomfortable murmur ran through the growing crowd of spectators. $50,000, Blake announced, pulling his checkbook from his jacket pocket. If you can hit 3 bullseyes in a row at 75 yards. If you miss even one, publicly admit you cheated and leave. Senator Williams placed a cautioning hand on Blake's shoulder. Blake, perhaps this isn't the time. Blake shrugged off the touch. What's the matter? Afraid her little trick won't work 3 times in a row. Emma considered simply walking away. She had come today only because of her promise to Nathan not to engage in public spectacles. But something in Blake's dismissive arrogance awakened a dormant fire within her, a sense of injustice, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been underestimated or excluded. I'll take your challenge, Emma said softly, on one condition. If I win, the $50,000 goes to the Veterans Support Foundation. Blake hesitated only briefly before nodding. Fine, it's not like you'll win anyway. As Emma moved to the 75-yard mark, Rebecca approached her. Miss Miller, you should know that Mr. Radcliffe holds the club record at this distance. No one has beaten his score in 5 years. Emma nodded, appreciating the warning. Thank you for your concern, Miss Johnson. But I'll be fine. Rebecca studied her, noting the quiet confidence that seemed at odds with Emma's unassuming appearance. Blake was making a show of the event. Now, ladies and gentlemen, he announced to the substantial crowd, we are about to witness either the most impressive fluke in shooting history or the most embarrassing failure. 3 bullseyes at 75 yards with a standard handgun. Impossible for an amateur. Emma loaded fresh magazines methodically. As she prepared, memories of Nathan's lessons filtered through her mind. When the pressure is on, he had told her, fall back on your training. Let your body remember what your mind might forget under stress. The range had gone completely silent, all attention focused on the confrontation unfolding. For the first shot, Emma took slightly longer to aim, adjusting to the increased distance. The crack of the gun was followed by another perfect hit. Blake's jaw tightened visibly. The second shot came more quickly, with Emma adjusting her stance minutely before firing. Another bullseye. Before taking the third shot, Emma twisted her wedding ring once, feeling Nathan's presence as strongly as if he were standing beside her. The final shot split the air and hit dead center again. Blake's face had drained of color, his expression frozen between disbelief and fury. Rebecca returned with the 3 targets, playing them for verification. There was no question. 3 perfect shots at a distance that would challenge even experienced marksmen. Congratulations, Ms. Miller, Rebecca said, unable to keep the admiration from her voice. That was remarkable. Blake snatched the targets, examining them with increasing desperation. This is impossible, he hissed. No one walks in off the street and shoots like this. She must have rigged something. Emma remained calm, though steel entered her voice. I believe we had an agreement, Mr. Radcliffe. Agreement with a cheater. Blake's voice rose. I'm not paying $50,000 based on some trick. Rebecca intervened. Mr. Radcliffe. Ms. Miller's performance was witnessed by dozens of members, including Senator Williams. The shots were legitimate. Blake rounded on her, his finger jabbing the air inches from her face. Know your place, Rebecca. One word from me to the board, and you're finished here. The threat silenced Rebecca, but her expression hardened. Emma watched the exchange with quiet intensity. If you're accusing me of cheating, Emma said evenly, perhaps we should move this discussion to a more private setting. Blake misinterpreted her intent. Private so you can avoid the consequences? No, let's settle this right here. He turned to the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, I propose a real challenge. 1 week from today, a formal competition. Me versus our mystery sharpshooter. 10 stations, varying distances, with club-provided equipment to ensure everything's fair. Emma realized she had unintentionally stepped into something much larger than a simple challenge. Part of her wanted to retreat back into anonymity, but a stronger part knew she couldn't back down. I accept, she said quietly. Same terms. If I win, $50,000 to the Veterans Support Foundation. Blake's smile didn't reach his eyes. Deal. And when I win, you publicly explain whatever trick you used today. As the crowd dispersed, Rebecca approached Emma again. That was either very brave or very foolish, she said. Blake doesn't lose gracefully, and he has considerable influence here. Emma nodded, the adrenaline fading, leaving her feeling drained. I didn't come here looking for trouble. I just wanted to practice. Rebecca studied her thoughtfully. Yet you shot like a professional. Who are you really, Emma Miller? Emma gathered her belongings. Just someone keeping a promise, she replied, her voice barely audible. What neither Emma nor anyone else knew was that Blake was already making a phone call, instructing his personal assistant to find out everything about Emma Miller, no matter what it takes. The tremor in his voice betrayed more than anger. It revealed fear. Because Blake had recognized something in Emma's shooting that the others had missed, the distinctive technique of military training, executed with a precision that couldn't be faked. News of the confrontation spread quickly through Boston's upper circles. By evening, Blake Radcliffe was inundated with messages from friends, rivals, and journalists seeking details about the mysterious woman who had challenged his supremacy. Seated in his penthouse overlooking the Charles River, he swirled aged scotch in a crystal tumbler, his post-victory celebration ritual now a means to calm his frayed nerves. Jessica Thompson, his girlfriend, scrolled through her phone, monitoring the social chatter with increasing concern. They're calling her the unknown marksman, Jessica reported. Someone posted a blurry video of her last shot. It's already got thousands of views. Blake drained his glass. One lucky day doesn't make her a marksman. By next week, everyone will know she's a fraud. Jessica looked up, her expression unusually serious. Blake, honey, those weren't lucky shots. I've watched you compete for years. She's good. Really good. The sharp ring of his phone interrupted their conversation. Blake checked the caller ID, immediately straightening as he recognized his investigator's number. Tell me you found something, he demanded without preamble. The voice on the other end was apologetic. Not much yet, Mr. Radcliffe. Emma Miller, 35, works as a senior accountant at Meridian Financial. Moved to Boston from Virginia Beach 3 years ago. Clean record, pays her taxes, keeps to herself. No social media presence, no competitive shooting background. Blake's frustration mounted. That's impossible. Nobody shoots like that without training. Dig deeper. After ending the call, Blake paced the length of his living room. I don't understand. Who is she? Where did she learn to shoot like that? Jessica set down her phone, watching him with growing unease. Blake, maybe it's time to let this go. Pay the charity. Chalk it up as an off day. Blake stopped abruptly, turning to her with an intensity that made her flinch. This isn't about the money. It's my reputation, my legacy. Across town, Emma sat at her kitchen table, staring at her phone. Michael Reeves had called 3 times since she'd left the range. The shooting community was smaller than most people realized, especially among those with military connections. Emma brewed a cup of tea and carried it to her small balcony, the events of the day playing through her mind. A part of her regretted accepting Blake's challenge. The attention was unwelcome. Yet another part felt strangely liberated, as though something long dormant had awakened. Emma's phone buzzed again, displaying an unfamiliar number. After a hesitation, she answered. Miss Miller, this is Rebecca Johnson from the Elite Shooters Club. Emma tensed. Miss Johnson, what can I do for you? Rebecca's voice carried an undertone of urgency. I probably shouldn't be calling you, but I thought you should know. Blake has people looking into your background. He's convinced you cheated somehow. Emma closed her eyes, unsurprised but disappointed. Thank you for the warning, Miss Johnson. But I have nothing to hide. Rebecca continued, her voice lower. Look, I don't know who you are or where you learned to shoot like that, but Blake Radcliffe has a lot of influence in the city. His family practically owns half of Boston. If he feels threatened, he can make things difficult for you. Emma appreciated the concern, but years as a military spouse had taught her about real threats versus intimidation tactics. I'll be careful, she promised. But I intend to honor our agreement. After the call, Emma opened a small wooden box containing Nathan's medals, letters, and their wedding photo. Inside, beneath the folded flag from the funeral, lay Nathan's logbook, a record of his training sessions and missions. She flipped through it, finding the pages where he had documented their practice sessions together. His handwriting was precise. Emma, 50 yards, 9 out of 10 bullseyes, natural talent, better than most recruits. The next morning, Emma called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Instead of going to the office, she drove to a public range far from elite shooters' exclusive clientele. For 8 hours, she practiced methodically, working through every technique Nathan had taught her. Each shot was a conversation with his memory, a promise kept, a connection maintained across the boundary between life and death. That evening, a text message arrived from Rebecca, Blake requesting rule changes for competition, now wants 10 different firearms at varying distances. Board approved. Emma understood the implication. Blake was restructuring the competition to showcase the breadth of his training and experience, areas where she might be vulnerable. Emma's response was simple. Thank you for letting me know. No changes needed on my end. In his penthouse, Blake received the update with growing satisfaction. Perfect, he told Jessica. 10 different stations, different firearms. There's no way she can match my experience across that range of weapons. Jessica set her wine glass down carefully. And if she does? Blake's smile held no warmth. She won't. But if by some miracle she gets close, I've arranged a little insurance policy. The day before the competition, Michael Reeves finally caught up with Emma by appearing at her door unannounced. You couldn't return a call? He asked, his gruff tone belied by the concern in his eyes. Emma let him in, relieved to see a familiar face. I've been busy, she explained simply. Michael surveyed the apartment, noting the shooting manuals spread across the table. So, I've heard the whole community's talking about you and Radcliffe. They sat across from each other at Emma's kitchen table. Nathan would be proud, not just of the shooting, but of you stepping back into the world. Emma's eyes burned suddenly with unexpected tears. I'm not sure that's what I'm doing. This wasn't planned, Michael. He nodded, understanding. The best battles rarely are, but sometimes they're exactly what we need. He reached across the table, his weathered hand covering hers briefly. You're not alone in this. I've made some calls. There'll be friends in the audience tomorrow. As Michael prepared to leave, he turned back at the door. One more thing, be careful with Radcliffe. Guy like that, with his money and connections, he's not used to losing, and he won't take it well if he does. Nathan would want you to watch your six. Emma nodded, appreciating both the warning and the military terminology. I will. And Michael, thank you for the pass. Everything. His smile was warm. Just keeping a promise to a brother. That's what we do. Blake Radcliffe's investigation into Emma Miller had begun as a matter of wounded pride. By midweek, it had evolved into an obsession that consumed his attention more thoroughly than any competition preparation. The initial background check had yielded frustratingly little. No criminal record, no competitive shooting history, not even a speeding ticket. On paper, Emma Miller was exactly what she appeared to be, an unremarkable accountant living a quiet life. I want you to focus on Virginia Beach, Blake instructed his investigator. She lived there before Boston. Check shooting clubs, gun ranges, instructors, anyone who might remember her. And that wedding ring she keeps touching, find out about her husband. The investigator's voice remained professionally neutral despite Blake's increasingly demanding requests. I'll look into it, Mr. Radcliffe, but marriage records in Virginia. I don't care what it takes, Blake interrupted sharply. The competition is in 2 days. I need information now. After ending the call, he stood before the wall displaying his most prestigious award, the Olympic gold medal from 8 years earlier. The younger Blake in the photograph beamed with genuine joy, an expression that had grown increasingly rare as success accumulated and the pressure to maintain his position intensified. The breakthrough came late that evening as Blake was reviewing footage of Emma's shooting form. His phone rang, displaying his investigator's number. Virginia Beach was the key, Mr. Radcliffe. Emma Miller is the widow of Master Chief Nathan Miller, U.S. Navy SEAL, killed in action 3 years ago. Highly decorated sniper. Blake felt a chill run through him. A SEAL sniper? Are you certain? The investigator continued. Absolutely certain. Miller was known for training his wife. Military buddies called it a hobby, but he took it seriously. One contact remembered him saying she was a natural with exceptional potential. Is there anything else? Blake asked, his voice carefully controlled. Just one thing, the investigator replied. Miller had a nickname in the teams. They called him the Ghost for his ability to hit targets no one else could see. He held several unofficial long-distance records within the special operations community. Blake ended the call, sitting motionless as the implications settled over him. Emma Miller wasn't just lucky, and she wasn't a fraud. She was the protege of a legendary military sniper. The narrative Blake had constructed of exposing an amateur's lucky streak was collapsing. Worse, the alternative narrative forming in its place was far more compelling. The widow of a fallen hero, honoring his memory through the skills he had taught her, challenging the privileged champion who had mocked her. Blake stared at the dossier. A SEAL's widow? His gold Rolex trembled. For the first time, the champion wondered, what else did her husband teach her? Across town, Emma was unaware of Blake's discovery as she focused on her own preparations. On Thursday evening, she received another call from Rebecca Johnson. Ms. Miller, I wanted to update you on the competition details for Saturday. There's been another change. Blake has requested, and the board approved, a modification to the scoring system. Each station will now be weighted based on difficulty, with the final station counting for 30% of the total score. Emma absorbed this information, recognizing the strategic manipulation. Let me guess, the final station involves a firearm that Blake particularly excels with. Rebecca's hesitation confirmed Emma's suspicion. It's a custom Macmillan TC 338, a long-range precision rifle that Blake has exclusive experience with. It's one of only 5 in civilian hands in the Northeast. Doubt crossed her eyes as she calculated the implications. She had extensive handgun training from Nathan, but significantly less experience with specialized long-range rifles. After the call, Emma sat at her kitchen table contemplating this development. If Blake was investigating her military connections, it was only a matter of time before he discovered Nathan's identity. The next morning, Emma drove to a specialized range outside the city where she had arranged private access to practice with long-range rifles. As she pulled into the parking lot, she noticed a black SUV with government plates. Leaning against it was a tall man with the unmistakable bearing of Special Operations personnel. Mrs. Miller, Commander Wilson, former Team 3. I served with Nathan in Baghdad 16. Emma had met many of Nathan's colleagues over the years, though this man wasn't familiar. Commander, I don't recall Nathan mentioning you. The man's expression remained neutral. We weren't in the same squad, ma'am, but in the teams, we all know the ghost's reputation. He gestured toward the range. Heard you might appreciate some pointers on the Macmillan TC 338. I have some experience with that platform. For the next 4 hours, Commander Wilson guided Emma through the intricacies of the high-precision rifle. Nathan taught you well with handguns, he observed as she completed a series of increasingly accurate shots. You have his patience and breathing control. This isn't so different, just magnified. Trust what you know. By early afternoon, Emma was consistently hitting targets at distances that would have seemed impossible days earlier. As they packed up, Wilson handed her a small notebook. Nathan's distance calculations and wind adjustment formulas. He developed them himself. Might come in handy tomorrow. Emma accepted the notebook with reverence. Thank you, Commander, but why are you helping me? You don't know me. Wilson's expression softened slightly. When you lose a brother in the teams, you look after what mattered to him. Nathan talked about you, how proud he was of your progress, your natural ability. Said you had the calmest hands he'd ever seen on a civilian. As Wilson departed, Emma realized that her private challenge had expanded into something larger, a representation of values that extended beyond the immediate competition. It had become a symbolic confrontation between different worlds, the privilege that Blake embodied versus the quiet excellence that Nathan had represented, flamboyant wealth against understated service. In his penthouse that evening, Blake received the final confirmation of Emma's connection to the legendary SEAL sniper. With each new detail, Nathan Miller's service record, his reputation within the Special Forces community, the circumstances of his death during a classified mission, Blake's confidence eroded further. He poured himself another drink, dismissing Jessica's concerned glance. It doesn't change anything, he insisted. Experience wins over sentiment every time. Jessica watched him with increasing unease. Blake, maybe it's time to reconsider. Pay the charity. Cancel the competition. This is becoming complicated. Blake slammed his glass down. Cancel and confirm every whisper that I'm afraid of her? No, tomorrow happens exactly as planned. He reached for his phone, dialing a number from memory. It's Blake. Is everything arranged for tomorrow? The conversation that followed was brief. After ending the call, he turned to find Jessica watching him with an expression he couldn't quite interpret. What was that about? She asked quietly. Blake's smile didn't reach his eyes. Just ensuring a level playing field, my dear. Nothing more. The Elite Shooters Club buzzed with unprecedented activity on competition day. The club's board had opened the event to the public, transforming a private duel into a premium-price spectacle. Inside, Rebecca Johnson supervised final preparations, noting subtle inconsistencies in the equipment at several stations, adjustments positioned to disadvantage anyone unfamiliar with their unique characteristics. Emma arrived dressed simply in jeans and a navy button-down, carrying only a small duffel bag containing Nathan's notebook. Rebecca met her privately, voice lowered. I've completed the equipment check. There are irregularities. Nothing I can officially flag, but enough to advantage someone with intimate knowledge of these specific firearms. Emma nodded. Thank you for letting me know. Blake arrived surrounded by sponsors and an entourage dressed in logo emblazoned gear. Approaching Emma, his smile failed to reach his eyes. Miss Miller, I trust you slept well. The subtle emphasis on her name implied he had discovered her connection to Nathan. I should warn you, the pressure can be overwhelming for those unaccustomed to the spotlight. No shame in withdrawing. Emma met his gaze steadily. I'll manage, Mr. Radcliffe. My husband taught me about performing under pressure. The competition area resembled a stadium with digital displays showing scores and 3 certified range masters officiating. As Emma prepared for the first station, she noticed a group of men with unmistakable military bearings seated in the back row, Michael Reeves among them. His subtle nod bolstered her resolve. Through the first stations, Blake's technique showed years of competition experience, flawless and precise. Emma's approach was different, quieter, more economical, with a stillness between shots that spoke of intensive training. By the fourth station, Blake held a slight lead thanks to his competition experience. At the fifth station, Emma noticed the equipment issue. The trigger pull on the Sig Sauer was subtly heavier than standard. Recalling Nathan's words, equipment fails. Conditions change. Adapt and overcome, she adjusted her stance and matched Blake's score despite the handicap. As the competition progressed, a pattern emerged. Blake excelled with competition-style firearms, while Emma demonstrated remarkable consistency across all platforms, particularly military-grade weapons. By the eighth station, Blake's lead had narrowed to a statistically insignificant margin. The audience grew increasingly vocal in support of Emma, captivated by her quiet competence against Blake's showmanship. Before the ninth station, Blake approached Emma. Impressive performance, Mrs. Miller. Your husband would be proud. The ghost's techniques are distinctive. I did my homework. Emma's hand stilled momentarily at the deliberate use of Nathan's call sign, but her expression remained controlled. Then you know he valued integrity above all else, Mr. Radcliffe. Something to consider as we finish today's competition. When the ninth station concluded, the scores were tied. The competition would be decided entirely by the final, most challenging station, the Macmillan TC 338, at an exceptional distance. Emma immediately noticed subtle adjustments to the scope and stock. Rather than protesting, she consulted Nathan's notebook, finding his formulas for compensating equipment variations. Blake completed his sequence first, placing 9 of 10 shots within the innermost rings. His final score set a benchmark requiring near perfection from Emma to overcome. Not everyone is built for championship pressure, he remarked, loud enough for nearby spectators to hear. As Emma loaded the rifle, a text flashed. Watch your back. Michael's warning came too late. Across the range, Blake's smirk said everything. Taking position behind the rifle, Emma felt a peculiar calmness descend. Same focused state Nathan had described from his missions. She made adjustments based on his formulas, compensating for the subtle sabotage with techniques born of combat experience. Her first shots hit with perfect precision. By the sixth, all bullseyes, the audience leaned forward in collective anticipation. As she prepared her final shot, a sharp reflection of light flashed across her sight line, a momentary distraction from someone near Blake's entourage. Emma paused, then refocused. With absolute control, she sent the final round downrange with unwavering precision. A 10th consecutive bullseye that surpassed Blake's performance. The crowd erupted in spontaneous applause that transformed into a standing ovation. Final results: Emma Miller, first place. Blake Radcliffe, second place. Rebecca announced officially. Blake's sportsmanship mask slipped, revealing raw fury as he offered a perfunctory handshake. This isn't over, he whispered. Emma replied calmly, "For today, it is. And I believe you owe $50,000 to the Veterans Support Foundation." Blake's facade crumbled completely. "You think this proves anything? That a military widow with beginner's luck can replace years of championship experience?" This was nothing but a publicity stunt. His voice carried throughout the now silent room. The equipment was rigged. The equipment was indeed rigged. Mr. Radcliffe, Rebecca cut in, holding up her tablet, displaying security footage of Blake's technical advisor tampering with the competition firearms, but not in Ms. Miller's favor. The club's security system records all access to the equipment room. The revelation sent shock through the audience, transforming admiration for Emma's performance into deeper respect. Excellence achieved despite deliberate sabotage. Blake stood frozen, registering not only the loss of the competition, but the potential destruction of his reputation and career. By Sunday morning, video clips of Emma's perfect final sequence and Blake's meltdown had spread across media platforms, transforming a niche sporting story into a broader narrative about privilege and redemption. Emma awoke to dozens of messages from journalists and sponsors, but responded to none, making only a call to Michael Reeves. "It's gotten bigger than I expected. What do I do now?" "That depends on what you want," Michael replied. "Privacy or justice?" Emma considered briefly. Blake hasn't paid the donation, and equipment tampering was fraud. There should be consequences. At the Radcliffe penthouse, Blake's crisis team strategized damage control. "We issue a statement citing extreme pressure, acknowledge a lapse in judgment, announce a donation to veterans' causes, and check into a wellness center," his publicist suggested. Blake refused. "I'm not apologizing. That woman had military training. That's the real unfair advantage." Their session was interrupted by Boston police officers. "Blake Radcliffe, we need you to answer questions regarding allegations of fraud and criminal tampering. We're investigating violations of Massachusetts gaming laws since the event involved a substantial wager." Meanwhile, Emma met with the Veterans Support Foundation's director, retired Marine Colonel James Harrison. "Several of our board members are also on the Elite Shooters Club. They've initiated proceedings to revoke Mr. Radcliffe's championship records." Harrison then presented Emma with an unexpected proposal. "Our foundation has been developing a marksmanship training program for veterans struggling with reintegration. The therapeutic aspects of shooting sports have shown promising results. We would be honored if you would consider taking a role in this initiative." 3 days later, Emma reviewed the settlement offer from Blake's legal team, a $100,000 donation to the foundation, double the original amount, a public apology, and request for a private meeting before any statements were made. That meeting took place in a neutral conference room. Blake entered with his attorney, his usual swagger diminished, designer attire replaced by a conservative business suit. "Mrs. Miller, I want to apologize for my conduct. The truth is, I've built my entire identity around being the best. When you threatened that, I reacted poorly, criminally." His rehearsed statement gave way to something more genuine. "I've never faced someone who shoots for reasons beyond trophies or recognition." It was unsettling. Emma considered his words. "Mr. Radcliffe, I didn't enter that competition seeking to unsettle anyone. I was keeping a promise to my husband. Your actions undermined the integrity of a sport you claimed to respect and dishonored the charity you agreed to support." Blake nodded, genuine shame crossing his features. "That's why I've increased the donation and accepted a 3-year suspension from competition." The settlement was signed, and as they prepared to leave, Blake extended his hand. "For what it's worth, you're the finest shooter I've ever competed against. Your husband taught you well." Emma accepted the handshake briefly. He would say I was already a good student. Sometimes the right teacher just helps us discover what's already there. 2 weeks later, Emma stood in the newly established training range at the Veterans Support Foundation's Rehabilitation Center, funded by Blake's donation and contributions from manufacturers. Her first class consisted of 6 veterans carrying visible and invisible wounds from their service. Good morning, she began, her voice stronger than it had been in years. My name is Emma Miller. I'm not a soldier or a champion, just someone who learned that sometimes the steadiest hands belong to those who have endured the greatest shaking. Today, we begin with fundamentals: how to stand, how to breathe, how to focus. 6 months later, at the Foundation's fundraiser, Emma addressed the gathering. 1 year ago, I walked into a shooting range for the first time in 3 years, keeping a promise to my late husband. I expected to reconnect with the skill he taught me, then return to my quiet life. Instead, I found myself in a confrontation that led to this program and the community we're building together. When the foundation announced the annual Nathan Ghost Miller Excellence in Marksmanship Scholarship for veterans pursuing careers in shooting instruction, Emma felt tears form. As the first recipient, a former Army Ranger who had overcome significant injuries, accepted the honor, Emma twisted her wedding ring one final time. This one's for you, Nathan, for everything you taught me about standing my ground. Perhaps Emma's greatest victory wasn't defeating a champion who had underestimated her, but finding her way back to the world, rebuilding a life that honored both past and future. For those watching her journey, from being ignored at the Elite Shooters Club to confidently leading the Foundation's programs, the lesson was clear: never underestimate the quiet ones. Behind their silence might lie determination forged through adversity, skills honed through dedication, and values anchored in experiences beyond understanding. And if you find yourself dismissed or overlooked, remember Emma Miller's journey from invisible to essential, how a woman once ignored at a shooting range transformed a moment of disrespect into a movement of respect, one perfect shot at a time.